The death of JonBenet Ramsey, a 6-year-old beauty queen, stunned the world and has baffled investigators for decades. Modern DNA technology, however, might now contribute to a definitive solution. The truth didn't appeal to anyone. There's new evidence that could make all the difference. According to those with knowledge of the case, the police are nearly finished with it permanently. But will justice ultimately be served? What actually took place that evening? Why has it taken so long to solve the JonBenet Ramsey puzzle? Just so you know, it's not good. New DNA technology has given investigators new hope more than 28 years after the horrific accident that killed 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey. But first, let's go back 28 years to the shocking case that sparked a response from the media and government. It all started when the Ramsey family's Christmas preparations went terribly wrong in December 1996. On December 26, 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was discovered dead in the basement of her family's Colorado home. A strangling device, a garrote, was discovered around her neck. According to an autopsy, she had a broken head. Her body had been in the basement the entire time, but another note claimed that she had been taken and that they would have to pay $118,000 to retrieve her. Her father called the police when he realized she was missing. After hours of searching, he discovered her lifeless body in the basement. The family appeared suspicious because he unexpectedly picked her up while she was crying. Numerous theories were raised by the peculiar ransom note and the absence of any indications of a break-in. In addition, the crime scene was not adequately secured, and the case attracted a lot of media attention. For a long time, the majority believed that the Ramsey family was guilty. Detectives sent DNA from JonBenet's pants to the FBI's Cody's database in 2003 after finding that it did not match anyone in the Ramsey family. With the support of Boulder's district attorney and these DNA results, the family was ultimately found not guilty in 2008. Additionally, the discovery of unidentified male DNA on a number of objects, including a blanket and the garrote, indicates that the murderer had close physical contact with the scene of the crime. Despite initial errors at the scene, new technologies now enable labs to obtain valuable profiles from these previously analyzed samples. The greatest advancement has been in forensic genetic genealogy, a technique that combines consumer genealogy databases with DNA profiling. Many people were hopeful that these techniques could be applied in the Ramsey case as well after they assisted police in identifying the Golden State Killer in 2018. JonBenet's father, Jon Ramsey, has repeatedly advised the police to test key pieces of evidence, including the ransom note, the flashlight, the garrote, and the undies, again using the newest labs that can create profiles that are ready for genealogy. According to JonBenet's family, the police have all they need to wrap up the case after all these years. For nearly 30 years, the Ramsey family has maintained that the police already possess the most crucial evidence required to crack the case of JonBenet Ramsey. Jon Ramsey, the girl's father, has repeatedly insisted that the police have all the evidence they require to identify the murderer and has encouraged them to employ cutting-edge DNA testing techniques. In January 2025, Jon Ramsey spent roughly 90 minutes with Boulder Police Chief Stephen Redfern and a genetic family specialist. They discussed how to retest the crime scene items using these technologies during that time. Chief Redfern and other officials have since expressed their willingness to collaborate with private labs and the FBI. This demonstrates their continued dedication to cracking the case after all these years. Additionally, Jon advised them to use family DNA, which has a 60 to 70% chance of identifying the perpetrator. Over the years, the investigation has been delayed due to the hesitancy of investigative bodies, particularly the issue of tainted evidence. However, with the support of the new leadership and public pressure from recent films, the government is still implementing new testing regulations. Additionally, John Andrew Ramsey, JonBenet's older half-brother, has come forward and expressed confidence that this case can be resolved. He claimed that because they think the case will be resolved in the end, people are still working on it every day. John Andrew was candid about his family's personal history during an interview the other day. In addition to learning that their mother Patsy had stage 4 cancer, they also had to cope with the death of their sister Beth in an automobile accident. They were unaware that yet another horrible tragedy would strike their family. When everyone believed they were responsible for the murder, their grief over losing their sister only grew. He stated, "We lost our sister and our daughter. We were victims, and the people we thought would protect and help us were the ones who pointed the finger at us. We were just normal people." After that, everything shifted. Additionally, according to John Andrew, the family was eventually released in 2008 following a decade of using DNA evidence to defend themselves. "All that remains," he said, "is for the police to swiftly identify the correct individual and start charging them with the use of contemporary forensic methods." Both Ramseys concur that the police already possess the crucial untested DNA and additional evidence that will ultimately lead to the case's resolution. However, they must decide. However, what about the perspective of Jon Benet's other brother? A lot of people suspected him. Burke Ramsey, the brother of JonBenet Ramsey, made headlines with his 3-part interview on Dr. Phil after remaining silent for nearly 3 decades. This was his first public statement since the 1996 tragedy. He declined all requests for interviews, including those from Netflix and other films. Burke wants to regain control of the story after years of media attention, as evidenced by his response when asked why he finally spoke out. "If the story is going to be told, I want to tell it. I don't want people talking about me. I would rather tell my own story." In contrast to what the news had reported when the case first surfaced, Burke vehemently denied using any object to harm his sister during the conversation. He told them that he stayed in bed the morning of the tragedy because he believed his sister was hidden, and his response was unambiguous: "Absolutely not." They also discussed how the police interrogated him during the interview. When Burke was 9 years old, he was scared and disoriented. He was so anxious that he smiled during the police interrogation, which they interpreted as a sign of guilt. However, he clarified that it was merely a sensation of discomfort and anxiety. During the interview, Dr. Phil played tapes that had never been shown before and discussed the 911 call with Burke. In addition, he inquired as to why he remained in bed while his family and the police were downstairs, and he described how shocked he was to hear of his sister's passing. Burke, however, has developed his own theory regarding the case and shares his hope that it will be resolved quickly. He believed that his family was not responsible for his sister's death, but rather a pedophile or attacker who was preoccupied with beauty pageants. He expressed optimism that the case would ultimately be resolved, particularly in light of the recently discovered DNA evidence. Yes, it appears that he was correct. In this 30-year case, the Ramsey family is no longer considered a suspect. One of the most peculiar aspects of the JonBenet Ramsey case was that the police initially believed that Jon and Patsy Ramsey, the parents, were to blame. Since there were no indications of a break-in, investigators focused a lot of attention on the family. Coincidentally, Jon's recent pay increase was mentioned in the note requesting money, which was written on home paper. The police investigation missed all the other good leads, including ones that suggested potential invaders, because they were so preoccupied with one thing. If they had searched more locations, particularly those where an insane fan or assailant might have been, they would have had more plausible suspects. However, they didn't, and the case continued for 28 years. The puzzle is nearly solved with the latest DNA technology. Given that JonBenet was struck by a heavy object and had a cracked head prior to being strangled with a garrote, it was not as obvious that the parents were not at fault as it initially appeared. Her parents probably wouldn't murder her in such a terrible manner. Cold Case, JonBenet Ramsey's director, Joe Berlinger, stated, "JonBenet died from strangulation with a garrote. If anyone thinks a mother would have the presence of mind or the knowledge and experience to create that kind of a torturous death for their daughter over bedwetting, I'm sorry, it's just not plausible." The parents were actually on the verge of being arrested on child endangerment and accessory charges, but DA Alex Hunter decided not to press charges due to insufficient evidence. All suspicions were dispelled when DNA testing revealed in 2008 that the Ramseys' male DNA belonged to an unidentified individual. Later, the family was formally exonerated by former DA Mary Lacey, who claimed that the crime had harmed them. She added that because the police were too preoccupied with proving the Ramsey family's innocence, they had overlooked crucial evidence that did not implicate them. Because they saw obvious signs of a male presence in the house that they were unable to identify, detectives in 2013 stated that their primary line of investigation was an intruder theory. More than 1,600 individuals were considered persons of interest. Those with pageant affiliations, registered sex offenders, and local burglars were on this list. However, they were too preoccupied with the family to investigate this at that time. However, the police were investigating more than just the parents. They also considered Jon Benét's brother, Burke Ramsey, who was only 9 years old at the time. Burke Ramsey was officially not considered a suspect. DA Alex Hunter subsequently stated, however, that Burke was not and had never been a suspect. Nevertheless, many people believed he was guilty, including the media. In 2016, the documentary series The Case of JonBenet Ramsey debuted on CBS. After a fight over a pineapple, CBS experts concluded that Burke, who was 9 years old, might have killed his sister by striking her with a lamp. Burke's history of hitting her with a golf club and his interview behavior served as evidence. The pine idea originated when Burke's fingerprints were discovered on a teacup and a bowl. There was a pineapple in JonBenet's stomach that hadn't been broken down. This might have been her final moment, according to CBS experts. Some of them also claimed that he was smiling and composed as the police questioned him. Burke and his family are not guilty of these charges, according to compelling evidence. He responded by suing pathologist Werner Spitz and CBS for libel, and the cases were resolved behind closed doors. Burke told Dr. Phil he believes his sister was killed by a pageant-obsessed intruder, and he made a strong public statement when he said, "You won't find any evidence because that's not what happened." There are still those who believe that Burke did it. While some believe he was too young to hit and strangle his sister, others believe he did so and his parents covered it up to shield him. What are your thoughts? In the box below, type your thoughts. Spending too much time on the parents was one of the main issues with the JonBenet Ramsey mystery. The entire investigation was hampered by the crime scene's contamination, which was another issue. Only JonBenet's bedroom was locked when the police arrived. The forensic evidence was considerably less trustworthy because family members, friends, and detectives were allowed to roam the house, cleaning surfaces, handling evidence, and even moving JonBenet's body. Instead of calling the police, her father actually brought her upstairs after discovering her body in the basement. Additionally, the police did not adhere to the rules during the investigation. Hours after the 911 call, JonBenet's father discovered her in the basement, even though they had not gone there. They did not immediately lock down the entire property or bring in crime scene dogs. Additionally, the incident occurred over Christmas, when departments were bewildered and understaffed. It was the perfect storm, according to former police chief Mark Beckner, who also acknowledged that the investigation's handling caused it to go in the wrong direction. Even worse, contemporary forensics has not retested crucial items like the torch, the ransom note, the rope, and the garrote, and some may have been lost or remain untested. One of the mysteries in the case that the police have not been able to unravel is the ransom note. On Christmas morning, Patsy Ramsey discovered the well-known 3-page ransom note on the stairs. People assumed the author was well-versed in the case because it sought $118,000, which was precisely Jon Ramsey's bonus. It was written from inside the house on paper using Patsy's pen. The note was overly dramatic, overly formal, and overly lengthy. It used signatures like SBTC, threatened to kill, and cited films like Dirty Harry and Speed. They began to question its veracity because it seemed so odd. They questioned whether it was intentionally placed there to sabotage the investigation or if it was an attempt to extract money from Jon Ramsey. The origins of handwriting have long been debated. There were those who linked it to Patsy. Others claimed it was written by someone posing as a thief. According to Utah private investigator Jason Jensen, SBTC could be academic jargon similar to that used by University of Colorado Boulder students, which would indicate a local attacker. Because psychological profilers believe it to be a fictitious kidnapping note intended to deceive police, they don't believe it. Real kidnappers don't understand that odd phrase, "We advise you to be arrested," according to linguistic experts. The police investigated other clues at the crime scene in addition to the ransom note. Even though the crime scene was filthy, there was still some evidence there. The brothers and father of Jon Benet believe that the police can re-examine this information and use it to ultimately solve the case. Investigators discovered a bag beneath the window and a scuffed open basement window with packing peanuts and leaves inside, suggesting a potential entry point. No one in JonBenet's family had a high-tech boot print discovered close to his body. Additionally, a garrote made at home from a nylon cord wound around the handle of a paintbrush from Patsy's art supplies was discovered strangling JonBenet. Her wrist had a rough, similar binding. In addition, a lot of DNA was found, which is uncommon for a case that hasn't been solved for so long. Her wrist cord, garrote, long johns, under her toenails and knickers all contained DNA from men who weren't related to the Ramsey family. They are still unsure of the recipient of the DNA, though. Other traces were found in addition. A palm print was discovered on the wine cellar door. Her hair contained fibers from a green Christmas wreath. That's not where the duct tape on her mouth came from. Additionally, a rubber glove was discovered in some nearby trash. The media was occupied with tracking their every step and ridiculing the Ramsey family while police attempted to determine who killed JonBenet Ramsey. JonBenet Ramsey's murder case swiftly transitioned from serious news to a television trial. To attract more viewers, the majority of cable news and tabloids emphasized the disaster as more shocking rather than concentrating on verifiable facts. Notably, Patsy and Jon Ramsey were wrongfully convicted in Geraldo Rivera's 1997 fictitious trial on the Geraldo Rivera Show before a judge actually found them guilty. This combined assumed guilt with amusement. Later, Rivera apologized to everyone for the hurt he had caused. Even more negative information about the family was disseminated by tabloids, who claimed that Jon was bad and that Patsy encouraged JonBenet to participate in beauty pageants. However, these allegations were later shown to be untrue. Burke Ramsey was even featured in the news at the age of 9, and his apprehensive feelings were conveyed through smiles that indicated guilt. Journalists and critics like Michael Tracy have referred to the coverage as a media assassination and a public lynching. They claim that by laying unsubstantiated rumors over the facts, the coverage broke the presumption of innocence. The Ramsey family received so much attention that it distorted people's perceptions and made a tragedy into a show. According to some detractors, this made injustice easier to occur. While trying to determine who killed JonBenet, the Ramsey family has persevered in growing and succeeding in other aspects of their lives despite the hardships they have endured. Jon Ramsey continues to be the most outspoken advocate for cracking his daughter's murder case. Although JonBenet's mother, Patsy, and his wife passed away in 2006, he continues to advocate for additional DNA testing and wants the government to re-examine his daughter's death. He married Jan Rousseau, his third wife, in 2011 and divides his time between Michigan and Utah. He continues to think that outside experts and contemporary investigative methods can contribute to the pursuit of justice. Burke Ramsey earned a degree in computer and information technology from Purdue University. He has remained anonymous and is currently employed in Michigan as a software engineer. He leads a quiet life away from the spotlight and is married. Although he declined the Netflix documentary series, he defended himself and supported the intruder theory by speaking out against Dr. Phil in 2016. John Andrew Ramsey is JonBenet's half-brother from his first marriage. In addition to appearing in the Netflix documentary series, he has advocated for a DNA-focused investigation and frequently criticized the way the police are handling the case. The entire family is now focused on ensuring that the police conduct additional DNA testing and identify JonBenet's true killer. At this point, everything appears to be coming together. The police simply need to retest the DNA and provide the Ramsey family with some answers. Which do you believe to be the most plausible explanation for JonBenet's death? Post your comments below. Thank you for viewing. I'll see you later.